ले चलते हैं नई दिल्ली, जहां पर एडवांसिंग एशिया शिखर सम्मेलन का समापन समारोह चल रहा है और वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली इस समारोह को इस वक्त संबोधित कर रहे हैं।
Worked hard to make this conference a great success. For this to be held in New Delhi, I think has another very important significance. 25 years ago, when we started our economic reform program, the critics used to occasionally say that the policies are being IMF dictated. And that was considered to be probably an extreme derogatory remark which could be made against the reform process. And therefore the reformists at that time used to defend themselves, no, we require it in our whole overall interest, and would be forced to take a defensive position. But then things have changed. They've changed in the last 25 years. As I've always mentioned, that the most significant change in India during this period has been that both in terms of demography, in terms of aspirations, and even in terms of political groups, regional groups, state governments, everybody seems to have become more aspirational. And therefore, the number of people, the constituency which supports reforms and has increasingly become aspirational, is much, much bigger than those who oppose them. And therefore, it's ironical that the IMF chooses New Delhi, and the focus is how do we advance Asia, particularly at a time when the whole world is full of uncertainties. We are unsure at what levels the developed countries are going to grow. There's a lot of volatility. There's also worries about the geopolitical situation. There are worries about the Chinese slowdown. There are also worries with the kind of political debates in developed economies, whether there will be increasing internal pressures to become more protectionist. And therefore, the world looks at regions like Asia, the world looks at regions like Africa, where growth potential in coming decades is going to be much higher. And of course, these regions need it because the maximum number of poor people are in these countries. And from the various sessions you've had, particularly with regard to the concerns and the fallout of the relative slowdown in China, our emphasis on the developmental models which exist in various economies in Asia, issues of poverty, healthcare, gender equality, other social issues in this region, I think the last 2 days and more have done well in keeping the focus on this particular region. I'm extremely grateful to the fact that you've been, and the IMF has been recognizing India as what you've repeatedly described as a bright spot. But I can tell you that in the given global situation, we have our shares of problems. But there is an increased determination in India to somehow face the challenges and internalize at a faster pace our own reform process so that we can continue to grow. As the Prime Minister elaborated yesterday, our growth model really is based on our concern for poverty eradication. We still have a very large number of poor people in this country, maintaining higher growth levels, and ensuring that the impact of that growth translates into eradicating poverty of these sections itself. We've opened up various sectors of the economy. We've removed a lot of unnecessary conditionalities on investment. We've created a broad national consensus that we do require more resources. The resources within the country are limited, and therefore our economy must be strong enough in order to attract investment from various parts of the world. What is work in progress still is that we are trying to ease in the environment for people doing business in India. We've in particular tried to rationalize, that is again work in progress, our taxation and bring it down to almost global levels, our direct taxes. We are going in for a far more simplified indirect taxation regime. We've substantially resolved a number of legacy issues of the past, only very few remain. We've brought a lot of fairness into the governance system, eliminated discretions wherever we could, and linked up various what was regarded as privileges to a market mechanism itself. Having done all this, our emphasis now clearly is that wherever we find the pits existing, we need to fill them up. And therefore, our emphasis on rural infrastructure, generation of transfer of a lot of resources into the rural areas. Our second emphasis is on continuing to build physical infrastructure as far as India is concerned, spend more money on the social sectors, locate whatever appears to be vulnerable and strengthen them. We are trying to have a special emphasis now, both in terms of legislative changes and resources being put to strengthen the banking system itself. And I do feel that the next few months in bringing about these structural changes are also going to be extremely important. The current session of Parliament has already seen one landmark legislation 2 days ago, and I do hope to see another two in the second part of the session with regard to the insolvency law and the goods and services tax. Once we are through with them, I think this gives a major fillip and a push to our reform process. And even in otherwise a slow global environment, on the strength of exhibiting our own determination to move on the path that we've moved, I think there is a significant amount of growth that India can provide to the world. I'm sure this partnership between the IMF and Asia, India playing an important role itself, will make its own great contribution to the global economy itself. This is one part of the world which needs growth, which needs to eradicate poverty, and I'm sure the initiative that you have taken in organizing this conference with a special emphasis on Asia will go a long way in that direction. I thank you very much once again, and to all the delegates who've taken the trouble of being here for the past 2 days to be a part of this conference itself. Thank you.